Welcome to the Young Turks. We got a great hour ahead for you guys. I'm Cenk Uygur. JR is producing, and Jesus is directing today. And we got a lot of interviews for you guys on a variety of interesting topics, including foreign policy, where we can really begin to question the Afghanistan strategy, and we will today. And then we have an interview with someone who thinks maybe creationism doesn't make too much sense. We'll see how that one plays out. And then, so let's get started with the rest of the news then. So, good news today, but it's curious good news. Insurers, in the form of their main lobby, America's health insurance plans, have declared war on healthcare reform. Now, you might say, wait a minute, that's a little strange. Hadn't they done so earlier? No. They thought that in the end, through their work of their lobbyists, that the healthcare reform was going to make them more money, not less money. Why? Because they thought there was going to be a mandate that forced everybody into private insurance, and that, okay, then you got to cover some pre-existing conditions, etc., but you get so many more new clients, subsidized by the government, a lot of them are, and it pays off for you. Well, now that they've declared war, I think it's good news, because they wouldn't have declared war if they didn't think that it was going to hurt their bottom line, which means we might actually be getting to real healthcare reform. If this health insurance lobby throughout this whole process was like, oh, this bill is fantastic, don't you worry about it. In fact, we'll run ads for you. If they had continued that stance, I can guarantee you that this bill would have been horrible, okay? And as Howard Dean pointed out, if you do the mandates without a public option, you don't just have a healthcare reform that is not optimal, you have a bad bill that's going to do more damage than good. The fact that the insurance guys are fighting against it now leads me to believe that we're edging towards a good bill. Okay, now it's interesting. So what they did and how they're fighting back is they put out a fake report, which is what they do all the time, and they expect people to take it seriously, and I guarantee you all the Republicans will take it seriously, and they will quote it ad nauseum, and my guess is that the media will take it quite seriously and report it without half the time telling you where it came from. It's paid completely by the industry and by the lobbyist group, so it's a joke. Shockingly enough, it turns out they agree with the industry position. And they did a study that found out that if this version of healthcare reform passes, well, then your premiums are going to go up $1,700 for a family of four. And that it's going to go up $600 for a single person, more than it would have without the reform. Okay, boo! They're trying to scare you. The rates are going to go up. The rates are going to go up. Well, I love Congressman Anthony Weiner's response to it. He said, well, they just admitted that they're going to crank up your rates by up to as much as 111%. Now, isn't that a great reason for a public option? Okay, he said, you just made the case yourself. You say, you literally threaten the American people, we're going to raise your premiums if this passes. Okay, well, if you're going to raise our premiums, how about we get an option of something that might not raise our premiums? The public option. Thanks a lot for making our case for us. I mean, get a load of the set on these guys. They go around like thinking, hey, you know what? If you don't do what we tell you to do and make us more profits, what we're going to do is we're going to raise your premiums. Well, that was the problem in the first place. And you know, that night now in the Senate, they're discussing the trigger. If this ass continues for another 5 years, well, then we'll really have to step in and do a public option. Well, they just announced that it's going to continue for the next number of years. They just announced that they're going to jack up your premiums. So, boom, Olympia Snowe, Rahm Emanuel, are you happy? Didn't they just trigger it themselves? So, look, it's positive news because if we're going to have this fight, let's get it on, okay? And enough of palling around with these guys, because if you're palling around with them, that means you're not getting real health care reform. And the fact that they're angry leads me to believe, all right, now we're getting somewhere. Now we might get actual reform that helps us, the American people, and not those private insurance companies. All right, so that's my good news of the day for you guys on that front. And now, speaking of fighting back, the administration has realized, and I shared this with you guys, I think it might have been in the post-game show on Friday, honestly, that there was, it might have been at the very end of the show, actually. Okay, anyway, either way, I shared with you on Friday that the White House has decided they're going to fight back more, okay? And that charge is being led by a woman named Anita Dunn. They finally dawned on him that the conservatives were never going to play nice, and the Republicans were not going to play nice, and Fox News certainly wasn't going to play nice, and she has convinced the White House, hey, you know what? Instead of getting swift-boated every time, we might want to fight back. Gadzooks! What a crazy idea! So now we saw the article in Time magazine about that at the end of last week. Now we're beginning to see the results a little bit. Anita Dunn goes on Howard Kurtz's program on CNN and takes a couple of shots at Fox News. Now, to us, this might seem perfectly obvious, but in the world of cable news and the White House and the establishment, this is shocking stuff. As you can tell, as Howard Kurtz kind of defends his competitor Fox News here. Let's watch.
We're talking about conservative commentators, so let's talk about Fox News. You were quoted this week in Time magazine as saying of Fox News, it's opinion journalism masquerading as news. What do you mean masquerading?
Well, Howie, I think if we went back a year ago to the fall of 2008, to the campaign, that, it was a time this country was in two wars, that we'd had a financial collapse, probably more significant than any financial collapse since the Great Depression. If you were a Fox News viewer in the fall election, what you would have seen would have been that the biggest stories and biggest threats facing America were a guy named Bill Ayers and something called Acorn. I mean, the reality of it is that Fox News often operates almost as either the research arm or the communications arm of the Republican Party. And it's not ideological. I mean, obviously there are many commentators who are conservative, liberal, centrist, and everybody understands that. What I think is fair to say about Fox, and certainly the way we view it, is that it really is more a wing of the Republican Party. But if we put Fox in...
On that point, I'm going to interrupt you because I want to read a statement from Fox Senior VP Michael Clemente, who says the following. We'll put it up on the screen. An increasing number of viewers are relying on Fox News for both news and opinion, and the average news consumer can certainly distinguish between the A section of the newspaper and the editorial page, which is what our programming represents. So, with all due respect to anyone who might still be confused about the difference between news reporting and vibrant opinion, my suggestion would be to talk about the stories and the facts rather than attack the messenger, which over time has never worked. Your response?
Yes, well, I think that there have been numerous independent analyses that have looked at the difference between, say, CNN, ABC, NBC, and ABC and Fox, and have seen that there is a very different story selection. There's a very different, even down to the chyron they run below stories, that, this isn't us making it up, Howie. You study the media. You know that it's not just their opinion shows.
Take Major Garrett. He's the White House correspondent for Fox News. Right. Do you think he's fair? Do you think he's masquerading as a newsman?
I will say, and I have done this in my interviews, I have differentiated. No, I have not said that. I've differentiated between Major Garrett, who we view as a very good correspondent, and his network, and Major knows this. Let's be realistic here, Howie. They're widely viewed as, a part of the Republican Party. Take their talking points, put them on the air. Take their opposition research, put them on the air, and that's fine. But let's not pretend they're a news network the way CNN is. For instance, Howie.
All right, that about covers it, okay? And I like it because, hey, they're finally going after him. Would I have gone after him harder? Well, you might be familiar with my rule number one.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth. Number one.
Number one. Okay. Now, look, come on, this is a joke here. I mean, look, why is Howard Kurtz, by the way, defending Fox News? Now, you could be saying, look, he's asking questions that's challenging his guests, as he should. And I think that's part of it, no question. The other part of it is, look, these guys are all friends. Major Garrett is probably a friend of those guys, and they want him to continue working, so they don't want him to appear to be a fraud, right? Because you feel bad for your friends. But the reality is, most of the reporters on Fox News are frauds. They're not real journalists. They get fed by their vice president of news and sometimes all the way up to Roger Ailes with specific memos that tell them to doctor the news. In fact, there was a very famous one reported, and she should have mentioned this, when Dan Moody, the vice president of news for Fox News, wrote a memo saying, if Democrats win, I want you to go shoot images of Arabs celebrating and see if you can get radicals or Hamas guys, right, celebrating Democratic victories. Now, Did that news happen already and he asked his news reporters to cover it? No. He was hoping that it happened, and he said, look, just go out and get anybody celebrating, and we'll say they were celebrating Democratic victories. Now, you think they might be an independent news program? Come on. Look, the argument that you could have opinion shows and then news shows and have them on the same channel is an argument I actually believe. But their news, the problem isn't the opinion, guys. I say it all the time. I say, look, O'Reilly has a right to do his show. Hannity has a right to do his show. It's a free country. The problem is their news divisions that masquerade as news but are nothing but Republican propaganda. And anybody with 2 bits of sense would know that. Even conservatives know that. Anytime we get emails or comments or whatever, people say, oh, you guys just can't handle their conservative views. But everybody knows they have conservative views, including on their news side. The only reason why official Washington has not recognized this so far is because the Republicans say no, Fox News says no, and all those guys in the news have friends that work at Fox News. And the reality is, none of those guys should ever be hired as journalists or reporters again, because they're not journalists and reporters. They're propaganda pieces, okay? They're puppets. Now, the problem is, if you go down that road, the problem for the guys that work at CNN and some of the other stations is that they're all actors. They're all news actors. Now, Fox happens to be a wing of the Republican Party, and I don't think the other stations are, but what are their qualifications anyway, right? And so they're like, oh, those news actors on the right-wing side got caught. It might not be a good idea to reveal everybody's cover here. Maybe I'm being too hard on all of them, but I mean, that is at least 90% of the case the way I see it. So those actors got told to read those lines. Am I going to get in trouble for the lines that I'm being told to read? Because you think they write their own scripts on the teleprompters? They don't. 9 out of 10 of them don't. So, all right. Let me do one more thing here. Speaking of fighting back, I really wish that Gibbs had done a better job of fighting back when Chip Reed asked about the Nobel Prize win. This is clip number 3. This is obviously a press conference, and Reed's going to go after the White House and the Nobel Prize here. And let's listen in first.
Following up on the political question, I think the point a lot of your favorite people, the pundits, have been making is that the response to this has been like this. I mean, most Democrats have praised it, and most Republicans have said, you have got to be kidding me. Ronald Reagan didn't get one, but Barack Obama, nominated 12 days after he was sworn in, gets a Nobel Peace Prize. And the fear among some, even some Democrats, is that this is going to widen the partisan divide and make things even more difficult to accomplish on every front.
I'll leave the pundicizing to the pundits. The notion that somehow this is going to more greatly divide America,
And one last question. A lot of people think it is a partisan thing because Al Gore, Jimmy Carter, and now President Obama have all received awards for work on...
Teddy Roosevelt was in, but I don't think it was Republican or Democrat.
No,
he got it. Just
whatever. But Ronald Reagan, could I just ask you to respond to that?
Well, let me do this, Chip. I'm not a member of the Nobel Peace Prize Committee. I hate no.
Organization that supports liberal causes.
Well, and I hope you can get somebody on the phone at this hour in Oslo. I'm not a member of the committee, and I'll let you do that. The notion that this is somehow widens the partisan divide, I think, demonstrates what's wrong with pundits and instant analysis of what goes on in our society.
An organization that supports liberal causes. Is that what the Nobel Peace Prize does? Yes, because they're in favor of peace. You see, peace is liberal. War, apparently, these days means conservative and Republican. So be loud and be proud, conservatives, as you normally are, and say you don't want the Peace Prize. You've never earned the Peace Prize because you've never tried, okay? Because that is not what your party's about. And I wish Gibbs would have said it. Hey, you know what? If they tried for peace, they might get the Peace Prize. And the excellent example of that is Teddy Roosevelt, the guy that he mentioned. He was a Republican. He won the Nobel Peace Prize. That was at a day and time that the Republican Party cared about peace. They don't anymore. If they do again, maybe they'll start winning Nobel Peace Prizes. Take that and smoke it in your pipe. Okay, partisan divide. It's going to make it worse because he won the Nobel Peace Prize. Are you kidding me? Man, if I was a White House spokesperson, we'd have trouble, that's for sure. Okay, but I would definitely go with rule number one.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth. Number one.
You know what? I'm going to do one more clip here, even though it's not advisable. Speaking of Nobel Prize, this woman drives me nuts. Here's Liz Cheney on that famously fair and balanced Fox News channel.
What do you think of President Obama winning the Nobel Peace Prize?
Well, Chris, I think the president himself understands he didn't earn this prize. And I think, therefore, the notion that, as the White House has said, he would go to Oslo to accept the prize would just sort of add to the farce.
Do you agree with the widespread analysis that the Nobel Committee was sending a repudiation of the Bush-Cheney policies?
Well, I think what the committee believes is they'd like to live in a world in which America is not dominant. And I think if you look at the language of the citation, you can see that they talk about, President Obama ruling in a way that makes sense to the majority of the people of the world. Americans don't elect a president to do that. We elect a president to defend our national interest. And so I think that, they may believe that President Obama also doesn't agree with American dominance, and they may have been trying to affirm that belief with the prize. I think, unfortunately, they may be right, and I think it's a concern.
Yeah. So the only way that America can be dominant is for us to bomb the living crap out of other countries, right? That's her implication. And since Obama's chosen peace, they gave him a peace prize. Wait a minute. Aren't they supposed to do that? No. We need to be dominant by invading more countries. That's what the Cheneys say. What drives me crazy is, you can disagree with whether he should have gotten that prize, and we had that conversation when he got it. But the conservatives have very successfully spun this as a negative thing. Isn't it terrible that Barack Obama got the Nobel Peace Prize? And the media, as usual, hook, line, and sinker. Bought into it 128%. Young Turks. Back on the Young Turks. Now, we got a lot of foreign policy news today as well, and one of them is about what we're going to do with Afghanistan strategy as Barack Obama contemplates whether he should send 40,000 more troops, as General McChrystal has suggested, apparently, in his report. I read an interesting article in Time magazine today about how the Afghanistan election was rigged, and obviously rigged. Many different districts where no one showed up to vote, yet all the ballots showed up anyway. Thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of ballots. And then many other districts where so many more votes were counted than ballots existed. So the fraud was fairly obvious, and Peter Galbraith was basically fired by the UN to cover up that fraud. I don't know why the UN is helping covering up that fraud. There could be some political reasons for that, but it was, in my opinion, fairly damaging to the current people running that operation in the United Nations right now. All right, now joining us to talk about this a little bit more is Brian Bender. He's written for the Boston Globe, Taliban not main Afghan enemy. Brian, welcome to the Young Turks.
Glad to be here.
So let's talk about, if the Taliban is not the main enemy in Afghanistan, who is?
Well, clearly the Taliban is no doubt an enemy of the United States and of the Afghan government, but I think one of the things the Obama administration is grappling with is this question of who is the Taliban. The Taliban has come to mean sort of something very new than what it meant 8 years ago when the U.S. toppled the Taliban government in Afghanistan, led by Mullah Muhammad Omar, who is still at large, people believe, in Pakistan. That movement that had controlled Afghanistan clearly still exists. Some of its leaders are still around, both in Afghanistan and in Pakistan, and they are planning and plotting attacks against U.S. forces, against the Afghan government, against NATO troops. But one of the things that the intelligence agencies are trying to figure out is whether or not the whole number of different groups, militias, tribal forces that are also fighting, are really loyal to this Taliban leadership, or whether they are fighting alongside them in cooperation with them out of other reasons, non-ideological reasons, really sort of local reasons, protecting their territory, protecting their smuggling routes. And at least some intelligence officials that I've spoken to have concluded that the vast majority of the fighters, the insurgents in Afghanistan, are not very tied to this Taliban fundamentalist ideology.
Well, all right.
And are fighting for their own reasons.
Well, that has an obvious implication, right? I mean, I'm not sure that it's obvious, but the implication is that if they're not wedded to extremist religious ideology of the Taliban, that they could be bought, right?
Well, I mean, that's clearly something that some of the commanders, including General David Petraeus, who was the commander in Baghdad and in Iraq and is now overseeing both the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, that he believes. He believes there are elements that can be peeled off. As somebody I talked to had said, Afghanistan for centuries has been the location of this so-called great game between world powers, the Russians, the British, the Persians, the list goes on. And to play the game, the Afghans have to play. And they always have played throughout history. In other words, outside powers have been able to use some of the groups within Afghanistan to achieve some of their own aims. So the idea is if you can isolate those groups that are fighting that don't necessarily ascribe not only to the Taliban worldview, but by extension Al-Qaeda, because we know that the Taliban that ruled Afghanistan was pretty tight with Osama bin Laden. We know some of those links are still there. But the idea is maybe we or the Afghan government could deal with some of these groups, could buy them off, I guess is the simplest way to put it. To give them some incentive to stop fighting.
I don't have any moral problems with that. I would go forward with that in a blink of an eye. Here's my problem with it. Strategically, to what end? We buy them, and then what do we do with them?
Well, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, I guess the idea would be, enlisting their cooperation or some level of cooperation with the government in Kabul, the Afghan government, whatever form that takes going forward, enlisting their support, their participation in that government to the point where it's in their interest to not give safe haven and support to the more fundamentalist elements, the more ideological elements like the Taliban leadership and Al-Qaeda to plan and plot their attacks on the West. I think the idea is that you would enlist some of these groups or get them to flip, if you will, to help reach what is so far at least been the more strategic goal of the Obama administration, which is to prevent Afghanistan from again becoming a safe haven for Al-Qaeda. Now, what we're not talking about is Pakistan. And obviously that is a whole other nut that we have to crack, because a lot of these most hardened individuals and groups are in Pakistan. They're not in Afghanistan. And we have limited ability to affect what goes on there.
Well, let me address that a little bit, but I want to stick on the main point that we were discussing there, because look, some people say, hey, let's, Senator Feingold wrote an editorial in the USA Today saying we have to focus on Al-Qaeda globally, and certainly in Pakistan, where most of their leadership is. And we've had debates on the show with people who want to pull out of Afghanistan, and I say, yeah, that's great. I'd like to concentrate on Pakistan too, but one of the ways that you do that is by having troops in Afghanistan, because if you don't, then they'll just flow right back into Afghanistan. Okay, they're not stupid. The only reason they're in Pakistan is because we're in Afghanistan. So, I'm not convinced that withdrawing from Afghanistan helps us in squeezing the guys in Pakistan at all. In fact, I think it'd be counterproductive. First, let me let you address that. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, I think, most military officers who have experience there, diplomats at the State Department, intelligence officials who study this problem would agree with you that, pulling up stakes completely and leaving Afghanistan doesn't help us. It may, to some people, it may be the answer, because they think that whatever we try to achieve there is unachievable or it's unwinnable. But, I think you're right. And, being in Afghanistan does put pressure on some of these areas across the border in Pakistan. But,
See,
you know,
Brian, I'm sorry, Brian. Let me just get in there for a second because how I want to tie this together is, look, if it was a matter of, I think we got to stay as long as it takes to get the guys in Pakistan, and I think we're going to do that by staying in Afghanistan. I could be wrong, but I think that's the right strategy. Something along the lines of Vice President Biden's proposal. And earlier, I was in for staying as long as it took to basically unbreak the eggs that we broke in the first place in Afghanistan when we invaded, and set them on a path because we owed it to the Afghani people after our invasion. I no longer believe that, or I'm certainly getting close to not believing that, because there is no ultimate goal here. What do? We buy off these Taliban guys, or these guys that are not quite Taliban, that are not religious extremists, that just want the money or the territory. Okay, well, great. We buy them off. I'm in favor. That worked in Iraq. And then we hand them off to Hamid Karzai. And that brings us to the very beginning of the interview when I explained Karzai's government seems to have won through fraud and is an illegitimate government that doesn't have any legitimacy with its people. So it's ultimately a complete waste of time.
No, I mean, there's a lot of people who agree with you, that they look at this election and they say, well, you know, do we really even have a partner in Kabul that we could rely on for anything going forward? And, you know, a lot of what McChrystal is talking about doing, which is not just adding more American troops, but conducting, I think, what he would call a more comprehensive counterinsurgency campaign, which is not just U.S. forces, but building up the Afghan army, the Afghan police, so that one day the Afghan government could take over some of the security role. But, you know, it's questionable whether you can invest so much in the security forces of a government that, like you said, doesn't have a whole lot of credibility with the people. So I think that's quite risky, a lot of people would say, to spend a lot of money and a lot of resources to try and build up the Afghan government forces. I don't know that there's an alternative.
Yeah, well, the alternative is we try to fight Al-Qaeda and the Mullah Omar faction of the Taliban as much as possible, and then as soon as they're killed, we get the hell out. Because, I mean, this supporting and propping up the Karzai government is a losing battle, and it doesn't make any sense. I mean, if we had a real partner, then I think it's a real debate and a real interesting discussion. Without a real partner, it seems undoable and unwise. But as usual, that's my opinion. And one more final note on this. I wish somebody would point out that we wasted 7 years under Bush while we did none of this. So,
I mean, some people have. In fact, maybe not as strongly worded as you just put it, but I had an interview about a month ago with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Admiral Michael Mullen, who was pretty striking in his description of the situation. He said, basically, we're starting over in Afghanistan because for so many years the fight has been, I think he uses the words, under-resourced. But basically, you know, he's saying that for the last 7 years, much of the last 7 years, you know, we haven't been focused on Afghanistan.
Here's a question.
So it's not a big surprise that we're in the situation that we are.
Here's a big question that I've heard no one ask, Brian. Is it possible that George W. Bush blew Afghanistan worse than he blew Iraq? And nobody even seems to mention that. You know, now we're having a conversation about whether Obama's doing something right or wrong. Now, that's a fair discussion because he's the president now, and he's got to find, you know, a way forward here. But we got to realize who's ultimately at fault here for absolutely bungling this war.
Well, I mean, I think in the end, you know, 5-10 years from now, people may look back and look at Afghanistan as far more of a quagmire, far more of a misguided or mis-executed military campaign than they ever considered Iraq. I mean, Iraq has its problems, but for the most part, the Iraqi government is stepping up little by little. There, you know, is a modest amount of security in the country, and you know, it looks like it's on a pretty decent trajectory given what it looked like a couple of years ago. So I think you're right. I think Afghanistan, you know, people made a lot of comparisons between Iraq and Vietnam. I think politically, Afghanistan may be much closer to Vietnam than Iraq ever was. And, you know, Obama's facing what Lyndon Johnson basically faced, a war that he inherited, generals that want to dramatically expand the U.S. military effort there, but not a very clear or at least agreed upon goal of what we're trying to achieve and when we're going to achieve it. So,
All right. Brian Bender from the Boston Globe. We really enjoyed having this conversation. Thanks for coming on.
No problem, anytime.
All right. One more foreign policy news for you guys. Turkey and Armenia have struck a deal. And, we talked about this a little bit at the end of last week, but it was made official over the weekend. And one of the reasons that I bring it up is the role of Hillary Rodham Clinton. We've had some people email us in the past and say, hey, how come you think Obama's foreign policy is great, but you haven't given any credit to Hillary Clinton? Because to her credit, funny enough, she hasn't taken credit. There has been no news stories about how Hillary Clinton was instrumental in this deal or that deal or the formulation of policy. And so there was no articles that I could point to saying, hey, look, here's what Hillary Clinton did in this case. Now, there is in this case, because that deal was on the precipice of falling apart on Saturday. They had this whole thing ready, and they had brought in all these people from Russia and other countries, and Hillary Clinton was on the site, and it was about to fall apart, and Hillary Clinton pulled it back together and made sure the deal got done, which is a great credit to her. Now, the problem was, of course, nationalists on the Turkish side and the Armenian side were angry with the deal because anytime peace gets made, people are, of course, pissed. Okay, and they say, oh, no, you shouldn't have done it because the wording was wrong. You shouldn't have done it because you haven't resolved the issue with Azerbaijan yet for the Turkish side. And for the Armenian side, there was the unacceptable idea that you would do a panel to decide, what actually happened historically. Now, if that panel is rigged, it is an unacceptable idea. If it's not rigged, they're going to decide what you said happened, and then you lose nothing. And it's a pretty damn good deal. And for peace and for better relations and for a better economic situation, that's how these deals get made. Nobody's entirely happy. That's where I believe in compromise on both sides. But luckily, partly thanks to Hillary Clinton, it got done on Saturday. So we move forward. All right, now speaking of moving forward, I want to talk to our next guest. He's Professor Matt Young, and he's written the book, Why Evolution Works and Creationism Fails. Professor Young, welcome to the Young Turks.
Hi.
Professor Young, I want to, why the focus on creationism failing?
Why the focus on creationism failing? Because creationism is, it had been gaining considerable ascendancy in the United States, not to mention Turkey, by the way.
That's true, yeah.
And if I may be completely honest, it's a bunch of baloney.
Okay, and somebody had to say it, I guess.
It's completely anti-scientific, I think. If you accept creationism, at least the young Earth version of creationism, you have to deny virtually all of our sciences, geology, astronomy, cosmology, nuclear physics even.
Professor Young, though, here's the thing. Look, I generally agree with you, but some people would say, and I think it's a fair question, okay, look, let's ignore the people who say that Eve came out of Adam's rib. That obviously is not going to jive with science. But
it's also probably a mistranslation of the Bible, by the way.
It could entirely be. So, but let's talk about people who believe in evolution. Bill O'Reilly, of all people, said this the other day, but he believes that it was guided by God's hand and that it was intelligently designed that way. Why couldn't that be possible?
It could be possible. It's just that there's not a shred of evidence to support that contention. All the evidence that we have suggests that it's a combination of, I don't want to oversimplify, but it's impossible not to, it's a combination of kind of random chance and deterministic laws.
Well, you see, but they would say that's your religion, Professor Young.
It's not a religion.
They would say, look, you see random chance, I see Jesus Christ. Where's your evidence? Why are you demanding the evidence from me? My evidence is that he walked on water. He had these miracles, and he had witnesses to these miracles, and you have no evidence about, your random chance.
Sure I do.
What's that?
If an organism like me was intelligently designed, I would not have a back that was designed for walking on four legs. It wouldn't hurt me at this very minute. I would probably not have hay fever. My family would not have countless autoimmune diseases, which we got from evolution by chance.
Well, they would say that is part of the challenges that, God has, in his infinite wisdom, decided to test you with. And that you stand straight on your back because you needed to collect food to give it to your mate so that she would mate with you.
Yeah, you can say that. Now prove it.
Uh-huh.
Design an experiment or a mathematical model or whatever you want to prove it. We have a vast amount of evidence, first of all, that descent with modification, which is what I prefer to call evolution, is an observed fact. It's nice to know that Bill O'Reilly's right about something. However, when we try to devise models and an overarching theory, which is known as the theory of evolution, then we don't find any room for anything but random chance. If you want to say that God got in there and twiddled with the genome every once in a while, you can do that, but it doesn't get you anywhere.
You know, would you grant that God could have set it in motion? That he's not an active player? Yes, random chance seems to have, you know...
That's different.
Yes, so it is different. And so would you grant that that's a possibility?
Sure, it's a possibility. I don't happen to believe it's the case, but it's certainly a possibility. However, if you want to say that, you have to say then that God chose the fundamental physical constants, for example, to be exactly right so that life would happen. It's a very strange way to go about it. The genome is certainly not front-loaded in the sense that the very earliest creatures, I don't know what they are, we don't even know what they are, I suppose, they don't show any sign that they have our genes in them, the bacteria and so on.
So explain why that's relevant. We're talking to Professor Matt Young. He's the author of Why Evolution Works and Creationism Fails.
Co-author, actually.
That's right, along with
Paul Strode.
Paul Strode.
Yeah.
You're both from Colorado. So front-loaded, I think that probably threw a lot of people for a loop. What do you mean by that?
I mean that some of the creationists, those who accept descent with modification and so on, I suppose you could say they're uncomfortable with the idea that God went in there and twiddled some base pair every so often to cause descent with modification. And what they would rather say is that everything was set up in advance. The problem is that very simple organisms don't have the same genes that we have. Where'd our genes come from?
Well, that's the great wisdom of God, that he could create it from, you know, no similarities to, at the end, us.
Yeah, you can say that if you want to.
All right. Now,
again, it's essentially an unprovable contention. As long as you want to believe that God did that, that's fine. That's up to you. What I get concerned about is those who don't accept that, but in fact try to argue that our theory of evolution is wrong.
Mm-hmm. See, that gets to another question, and probably a final question for the moment being, of microevolution versus macroevolution. Because I hear a lot of people saying, well, look, I believe in microevolution. I see the butterfly changing, right, or the moth changing, but I don't believe in macroevolution. Is there any real difference between micro and so-called macroevolution?
Not a whit. Macroevolution is the accumulation of gobs of microevolutions. It's a completely fraudulent argument. In fact, it's an argument that I think some of the creationists, probably young Earth creationists mostly, have had to fall back on, because it's transparently clear now that there's such a thing as microevolution. You can see it over a few human generations, for example. So they pretend that there's a difference between micro and macroevolution, and they claim that God created certain kinds. Kinds are not clearly defined, but there's a dog kind, which maybe includes bears for all I know, a cat kind, feline kind, and so on. And they vaguely resemble our families or genuses or something like that. And they claim, some of them, that you can have evolution within kinds, but that creatures can never break out of their kinds. The favorite line they use is that how come a dog never gives birth to a cat?
Yeah, how come, Professor Young?
Oh, I don't know. I'll have to work on that. Sometimes you get such utterly silly questions. It's almost impossible to answer them. The one response you'll get is, if humans evolved from apes, why are there still apes? Can you answer that one?
Yes, because that line stayed as it was, and other lines evolved, and they changed. So then you had two different lines.
There's a better answer than that. If you evolved from your parents, how come there are still parents?
Aha! Think about that.
See, I mean, it makes no sense to ask a question like that, and they think it's a gotcha question.
All right. Professor Matt Young, author of Why Evolution Works and Creationism Fails. Thanks for joining us on the Young Turks.
Okay, thanks very much.
All right. We'll be right back. Young Turks. All right, back on the Young Turks. Today I saw an article that led me to believe I found out one of the reasons why the conservatives have gone after Acorn so much. Well, it turns out, as with everything else, it's about the money, Lebowski. Turns out Acorn has the banks give them some degree of money to help with, to get housing for poorly served communities. And some of these communities happen to be minority communities. And the banks were tired of paying that money. And before, they used to have redlining practices, and Acorn helped to get rid of redlining practices. You know what redlining is? When they draw a red line in the map and they go, all right, we're not going to give loans to these neighborhoods because they're black or Latino or whatever. And now that is not in any way, shape, or form an exaggeration. That's literally what they did, and that's why it was outlawed at some point. And Acorn helped to get rid of this redlining areas. In fact, they would go into the redline areas and give them advice on what kind of loans they can get too. What makes sense, what doesn't, what's wise, what's not. And the banks didn't like that either, because they eventually realized, hey, you know what? We could really take advantage of these red line districts. And this Acorn is a pain in our ass, going around telling people, hey, you know what? Those subprime loans might not make sense because they have ballooning interest that you can't pay later, among other things. So now, who is doing the bidding of the banks in getting rid of Acorn and their involvement with banks? You want to take a wild stab at it? You guessed it, the Republican Party. The butt boy bitches of the banks and the corporate lobbyists. So now they're saying, oh, Acorn is terrible. You see all these things we caught Acorn in. They're the worst of the worst. Make sure they get off the banks' asses, because we must protect the banks at all costs. Now, the great irony of this is that they get these sucker conservatives, some of them real conservatives, who are out in the streets campaigning for the Republicans and saying, no corporate interest, no lobbyists. Those guys you're campaigning for are the biggest butt boys of those corporate lobbyists. They are owned by those corporate lobbyists through and through, and they get you to do their bidding for them. So when you're out in the street, you teabaggers, and you're yelling and screaming, you're ironically yelling and screaming to help the bankers. Oh, God. God have mercy on your brains. Not your souls, because some might question that, but with some of the heinous signs that were put up, etc. But I question your wisdom most of all. To do the bidding of these banks in your, foolish endeavors there, as you think you're helping the local population gain liberty and fight against the powerful. No one helps the powerful more than you guys do through the Republican Party. Sad day for you. All right, there is a nice food fight in the Republican Party, though. We have time for it? Come on, let's do it. Scarborough versus Obama. This is fun. Go with the first clip.
Monday morning on Scarborough show on PMSNBC, and Scarborough doing his best impression of a neutered, chickified moderate. This can't be helpful for our political process, for Limbaugh to be laughing with glee that Obama failed in Copenhagen.
I've been accused of many things, but being chickified has never been one of them. But
really?
I would be careful if I had put my testicles in a blind trust for George W. Bush for 8 years.
That's one way of putting it.
Careful.
First use of testicles on Morning Joe? I'm
trying maybe.
God, no.
Absolutely not.
Testicular first.
But there are a lot of people on the right that in fact did put their testicles in a blind trust for the past 8 years and stopped being conservative and started being apologists. And that's about all I'll say. Other than you remember that scene with George W. Bush carrying Rush Limbaugh's suitcase into the White House?
Yeah.
Now we know what was inside the suitcase.
Wow, there you go, Scarborough. I'm on your side for a change. Young Turks.
I know that I'm making it. I gotta get money, nobody's taking it away. No, 'cause I'm a